And now, everyone, please put your hands together and give a warm welcome to your host, Ash Bennett.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Yes, I'm Ash. Thank you all for coming. It's my first Hall of Fame that I've ever been to. So first things first, selfie time. So everyone's got a wave. Hold up. Ready? Everyone wave. This side. Everyone wave. Awesome. You'll see why I do that shortly. Beautiful. I think someone at the back had their eyes closed, though. Anyway, I'm going to talk to you today about my time at Full Sail, what I did in gaming coming out of that, and then what I've done beyond gaming, right? Which is, I want to show you guys that while you're studying gaming, a lot of you in this room, I assume, are studying gaming. That's not what you have to limit your career to. So I'm also going to show you a meta presentation. This is how you present a presentation, or one way you can present a presentation. Step one, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. I just did that bit. Step two, I'm going to tell it to you. And step three, I'm going to remind you what I just told you. All right? So just watch out for that meta presentation in here. Okay, so yeah, I'll give you the overview. The TLDR, so this is like me telling you exactly what I'm going to tell you. If you walk out of the room, this is the point, right? You learn a bunch of stuff at Full Sail. Those things don't just apply to gaming, but it's important that you keep on learning. Like, it's not just your school when you're done. You have to keep learning. You have to keep adapting, try new things. If you do that, you can do whatever you want. Like, it's literally that simple. Be comfortable being uncomfortable. We'll talk about that. So let's step back. Let me start. I'm an international student. I'm from London, in case you couldn't tell. Before Full Sail, though, I was doing a different degree. I was in England, and at the time, I didn't think gaming was a real job, like I'm sure a lot of your parents didn't, so a lot of you might not have thought about. I wasn't sure if gaming was a real thing, so I was even looking at a completely different career. I was going to do medicine or something, but decided to go down the art and technology route anyway, and went to university in England, and I hedged my bets. I went for a degree in multimedia computing, and that covered a bunch of stuff like web development, video, DVD, all that kind of stuff. But there was an element of gaming in there. So I thought, great, I get to try it at least and see if it's something I can get into. Which is all good until the point where I got to that stage of the degree, and they're like, oh, actually, that class is cancelled, so you can't do that anymore. I was like, well, that sucks. So I had that itch that hadn't been scratched, right? So anyway, later in the degree, I had to go get a job. It was a 4-year degree. Third year, you had to go get a job in industry, like an internship or a job, whatever. So while I was looking for that, I came across Full Sail. And couldn't believe it, right? This place looks awesome. And I happened to be coming to Orlando on vacation anyway, so I'll come stop by and take a look. Did that, obviously fell in love with it, like a lot of you would have done, and come joined. So I obviously graduated. I was in one of the first bachelor's classes, design and development. Graduated in 2006. That's me and Rob. Don't we look wonderful? So that's my time at school, right? It went well. I did a good job in that. So then getting a job in the industry. A lot of people ask me, well, how did you do that? Well, it might be a little bit unusual because everyone tells you, oh, you don't get a job at GDC, but I got a job at GDC. So the way I went about that was before the event, they had, this is a long time ago, right? So things have moved on a bit. We've got apps and everything to do with this stuff, but it was a website that they had that was new, that was, hey, here's all the people that are going to come to the event, and you can connect to them and send them messages and stuff, which is wow, amazing. So I did that. I was looking at some of the people that were attending and looking at their bios and resumes and stuff, and some of them stood out to me as well, particularly recruiters. They stood out to me because I wanted a job. But they would say what company they were from, but also what area they were in, because it's not like one recruiter at EA, for instance, does all of the recruiting for EA, right? They divide things up. So I found this one guy that seemed interesting, that he was doing online, and he said it was a couple of words in there related to online. So I didn't really know what that meant. What were you recruiting for? So I went off and did some research first, what is EA doing in the online space and things like that. And there was a few things. So I came back, and that's when I reached out, because I'd done my research, right? hey, whatever your guy's name was, is it like this thing you're covering or this thing? So I'm super interested in that and whatever. And that's how the conversation started. And so it led to, long story short, it led to the interview, right? It led to like a coding test, and it led to like just a chat between me and him, so I clarified what the things were about, and then literally onto the interview, which since I was going to GDC, I was going to be in town where the office is anyway, so I made it easy for them to do that. And it all worked out great. This is from me presenting at GDC several years later, where I obviously do this thing of selfies with the audience. So you get to be in my next presentation, so congratulations. It all worked out. I graduated. They were cool with me like going back, finishing school. I got the job lined up a couple months into final project. They were cool with me having to go like international. I had to go get my visa renewed and that kind of thing. But they were all good with that, and I moved out to Rebel Shores. But going into it, I didn't think I would be there long term. I thought, this would be my first gig. It's at a big company. The reputation had its ups and downs, right? But they're obviously doing something right. They release a lot of games. They release things that sell millions of units. And there were games I like to play. So, yeah, why not try it? But I can just go for a year, right, and learn it and pick up what I can and go do something else. But that's not really what happened. I ended up loving it and stayed over 11 years. Turns out that what I learned in that time is that making games is really hard, particularly like huge AAA multi-million-dollar budget games. So I kind of redefined what I thought success was going to be for me. It wasn't going to be striking out my own and making small games. It was going to be being part of a team that could produce like these awesome pieces of art, basically, that people love to play. This is one of the meeting rooms in Tiburon, the local office. There is actually a ball pit in the middle of the meeting room. Yeah. So what did I do in my career? I started out as a software engineer. I was working in that online stack that I was talking to that recruiter about. So basically things like login, matchmaking, leaderboards, that kind of thing. And we build central middleware that we could then have all the game teams implement once, and it would cover all their platforms, including PC and console stuff. So that was great. And then it kept expanding. So, okay, well now e-commerce is a thing, and now Origin became a thing. And then it kept expanding into what that meant, what online meant. So I just kept expanding my scope, which was really cool. Because that's what I learned I really enjoyed. I was like, okay, let me learn something, and now I got that. Let me keep adding more to that and more to that. And I realized that being in that central position would be good for me because I like to see a broader picture than just if I worked on the same game for every day for years. I think I wouldn't enjoy that, so people would love it. I don't think that was for me. So I was in a great position by not making the games, but by working on support platforms for them. And that's something I picked up in my tooling classes while I was at Full Sail. Most of the degrees about building up the technical skills to then produce a final game. But along the way, there's other classes like building exporters for Maya and building custom tools to make levels for your game, that kind of thing. And I was literally in one of those classes and said, I bet this is what I end up doing. And that's what happened. So just realize that there's more to releasing a game than just working on the game. So now it expanded. So the software engineer part happened, but it expanded out to developer relations. And so what that meant was I then moved back to the UK, and I was the only person in Europe that knew this stuff. Like, it was built in the US, it was all supported from there. So now I was like the one point of contact for the game teams out there, which was terrifying and fantastic at the same time, right? Because all I can do is improve myself to be awesome. And if I'm not doing well enough, I get to justify building a team around me, which is even better. But it all went well. The role kept expanding to more and more technology, like I said, and more game teams. So I was working with Criterion, I was working with DICE and a bunch of others, and I had a whole bunch of fun there. But after a few years in England, I decided to come back again to the US, back out to California again, and carried on doing the same thing for a bit longer, and then moved on to what we were calling launch managers. And what that was was expanding the scope again. So I was working on like all the online features for these games and helping them with their designs and adjusting the technology we needed to build to support those designs, that kind of thing. And now it expanded to actually launching the game of, okay, what does the game team need to build? What does the QA team need to test? What does the marketing team need to say? Like, for instance, we didn't want them to promise we're going to do a demo when we didn't have time or scope for that. What are we going to build a mobile app? Like, it kept expanding, the legal team, everything. So getting that whole different organizations across the whole company behind this particular product. So that was really eye-opening. That was a great role. After doing that for a while, so when I first joined as a software engineer, it was right before the PS3 came out, so I saw that transition. But by the time I was in this launch manager role, it was heavily emphasized because PS4 and Xbox One were coming out. And they introduced a whole bunch of changes into how games would work. Like you had to run within a gigabyte, well, you still don't know the rest of it, all kinds of things like that. And I was like the technical member of this team. The others were more like process people. So I had to help oversee a lot of the games there. So that was fun, but then we got through that launch window. Like we shipped a whole bunch of games. I think PvZ, Garden Warfare was my last one there. And then I was asked to go into mobile. And that's okay. I had a little bit of experience from mobile, so I could go do that. But basically, the company had acquired a whole bunch of studios. They had all had their own success in their own rights, but that meant they had their own tech already to run their own games. So how could we start to consolidate that and bring the best features from each of those backends into EA Central platform, which took me back to step one, right? I built that online platform for the HD stuff in the first place, or was part of the team doing that. And now we were trying to make those two things fit. How can we make mobile fit in an HD world, console world? So yeah, that's what I ended up doing. And so I worked on a whole bunch of stuff. Again, the benefit of being central and building tools and working with lots of different teams is you end up shipping a lot of games, get a lot of credits. So that's what happened. Like I said, I joined right before the PS3 launch, so Need for Speed Carbon was the very first game I contributed to, fixing some online bugs for them. And it went on to dozens of games. I did some sports, so a little bit of Madden, a little bit of FIFA, but it was mostly EA games, because again, most of the time I was in Europe doing a bunch of this. So there was several Need for Speed games, Burnout, so from Criterion and Ghost Studios, a bunch of shooters, like loads of Battlefield games. Battlefield 3 was a particular favorite. There was some Medal of Honor games, Crysis, because I was also working with external partners. EA would publish games from external partners like Crytek, so I would work with the partners team to go and consult with them, because sometimes they would use our technology, sometimes they use their own, so we'd have to negotiate some of that. So that was fun, seeing how that kind of process worked too. And there's a bunch of others not shown on here from studios all around the world. And then, like I said, mobile towards the end, and there was like Sims, SimCity, Simpsons, games that don't begin with S. So yeah, a whole bunch of fun. And so, like I said, I ended up staying a long time because it got kind of addictive working on all this stuff. And there was a whole bunch of people playing it. Like, how could I reach 100 million people otherwise? I didn't think that was going to be possible. So I had a great time doing this. But during all of that, I was still trying to do some of my own things. Like I said to you at the beginning, it's important to keep learning, keep expanding and adjusting. So I would still build websites. I would then try to deploy them to like Amazon Web Services, where there's a new thing. So let me try play with that. What does that look like? I learned Objective-C and made some mobile apps when they very first released the App Store. Like we tried doing something with that. And none of those projects necessarily make it big. Like I wasn't going to be a millionaire like releasing my own thing necessarily. There's always a hope. But the point was I was doing it to learn new things. And I can still apply the knowledge I learned from doing these things today. And it helps me take on bigger projects in my job, helps me move into new roles, and even just being able to translate in my current role between different people. Keeping with the gaming theme, right? If you know how to make a 3D model, you're more like, even if you do a crappy job of it, at least you can go talk to an artist about their process and how that works, and you can help maybe then make your tools better for them. You've got to have empathy for other people in the team and the different roles that they have. It's not just about you and the way you work, right? So by learning these other things, they help me expand. In some cases, I did find a couple of paid gigs on the side. Like I did get some websites and things I made for people, so it's always a bonus too. More things I was doing, I was starting to see AR and VR is going to be a thing, particularly VR. It seemed like that was going to happen. So let me start playing with that and see how I can apply that to my job. I got the Cardboard SDK from Google, which is free. The headset is not hundreds of dollars, it's like a piece of cardboard, literally. So I used my existing phone I already had, and just wrapped that around my phone. And I just started playing with it. I used that as an excuse to learn Unity as well, because I didn't know that yet. So I just like several checkboxes all at once, like VR, Unity, mobile, all in one, and it's like a multiplier of my time. So that was really cool. And then I was trying to make that a thing at EA. I was like, okay, let me pitch some ideas, and not necessarily for games, but for like things around it. Again, I don't want to necessarily focus on a game, but things that are going to work for the company. And so I started pitching a few ideas, and they were that's cool, but there's no market there yet. Like we're not going to invest making titles for this yet, so that's not so important. Let's wait a bit longer, which is fine. But I didn't want to wait. I was getting a bit tired of working in the mobile space, so. How do I make this a thing? So I started applying to other companies. I started, like right nearby to me was Oculus, right? Facebook has acquired Oculus. So I started applying to them. And like, truth be told, it didn't happen overnight, right? I had to apply several times. I went through 3 or 4 rounds of it over 1 to 2 years, probably, of applying to the company. But eventually, it started to happen. And they actually reached out to me and said, we've actually got this other role, which is not Oculus, but it's to do with AR. How would you like to do that? And I'd just seen, shortly before that, one of the F8 conferences, so keeping up to date with the industry trends. I watched like the Apple announcements and the Google and whatever, and I'd seen the Facebook one, and I had announced I had this platform using the camera on the phone to make an AR platform. So sweet, this AR is actually happening sooner than I thought. So when they rang me up and asked me to work on that, of course I will do that, yes. But play it cool. Yeah, okay, sounds interesting. Yeah, sure. So yeah, I jumped on it. And it obviously all worked out. I did the interview, that went fine. And so I ended up joining Facebook to work on Spark AR. Well, that's what it's called now, Spark AR. So for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a public platform. It's a tool that anyone can go download. It's kind of like Unity. You can download it from the web. You can then create 3D content that you can then publish through like Facebook, Instagram, Messenger, and a bunch of other products that Facebook has. And so now you've got like instant audience of at Facebook scale to seeing your content. So that was really cool to help them shipping that stuff. And I think the point of this is that I was willing to be flexible and pivot what I was doing and learn new things while applying my previous knowledge. Like I was coming to Facebook, I was new to the company. They were new with working with someone in my kind of position. This whole team was new there, that they've been kind of put together to release this thing. So there was a lot of new going on. So I had to find my feet again after being comfortable where I was for a long time. And that was a risk. Like, do I want to go somewhere new? Or I know how EA works. I know how to fit in here. So there's a lot of risk involved, but it's being willing to kind of take that chance and jump into something new. And I think I pointed this out already, but I'll just make sure that I didn't spend a lot of money doing these side projects. Like, that's not the point. I tried to find free, cheap, quick ways of doing these things. Like, again, the Cardboard SDK is free. After I joined Facebook, I started using the Spark platform. It was free to use the content and understand how it works and produce my own effects. The same applied from the previous page. Like, it's free to try Amazon Web Services, for instance. It's yeah. You can find tools and tutorials and things like that for free. So just try it, you can learn. So at this point, I've been at Facebook for 2.5 years. Again, I had to ramp up on a new culture, but everything at this point I'm doing great, and I'm helping now others learn and grow within the company because we're growing rapidly. So there's a bunch of new people to bring on board. So I'm not having to flex that more, not manager, they don't report to me, but more like mentorship muscle to help them on board and perform. And in the past few months, I've had another big pivot within the company. So one of the things I have to keep doing is reminding myself, like, am I doing the most important thing right now for myself and for the company? Like, what's the best thing I can be doing with my time? So as much as the AR, VR stuff is super fun and I could carry on doing that, I saw there were other issues in the company around privacy and technology they need to build there. So I volunteered. I don't know anything about this, and I was very clear. Like, I don't know anything about this space. I've got no experience in this. But I know how to get things done, so if you want me to help, I will. And they jumped on that because not a lot of people have got that mentality of like facing a fire and jumping into it and solving a problem. So they appreciate that, and that's where they put me, and that's where I've been for the past few months. It was going to be short term, but it's maybe not so much now. Yeah. So to show another number, right, I'm now comparing those millions of games sold to now billions of people. Like the magnitude of audience just keeps expanding, which kind of goes along with the theme I've been talking about of just keep growing and growing in responsibility and knowledge and experiences. So we're getting to step 3 now, where I tell you what I just told you. Again, be flexible, keep learning, try things across different domains. Like if you're a programmer, try something arty or audio or something. Don't just do things that are in the field and related to knowledge you already know. Try and expand yourself more. Yeah, again, you haven't got to do a good job, but at least like familiarize yourself with like the tools and the processes a bit. It can be stick figures and smiley faces, and it can be bleeps and bloops, but try it. Those skills that you find from other disciplines, if you want to keep doing games, that's fine too, but those skills will help you make better games. If you want to move into other domains, even better, you've got more experience to go and do that. So then what? Like, what now? I keep expanding on doing all these new things. So I keep learning new stuff. What should I be doing? If you want to make games, go make games. That's totally fine. You go do that. But you don't have to stay in that domain. You don't even have to start in that domain. You can go from Full Sail to do something else. You can go make cars drive themselves, or you could go make simulations to deal with climate change, or you could go make medical tools for surgeons, or make robots dance, the important things. But ultimately, just have fun. That's it. And with that, any questions? Thank you.
I was wondering, I'm also an international student, and I wanted to know how painless or painful the process of getting a visa to work here was.
Obviously, everyone's in a different situation, you're from different countries and whatever, so I can't speak to everybody, but for me, acknowledging, by the way, that I'm a straight white male from England that speaks English, right? I realize that's going to make things easier to come to the US. But still, for me, the part of the benefit of applying to a big company is that they've probably dealt with this before. They probably have a legal department, they probably have people that work that have come from other countries to come work for them. So they were going to know what to do much more than some indie studio would. So I used that to my advantage, right? I started applying to EA and others. So they made it pretty easy. There's obviously a bunch of forms to fill out, it takes time and all that stuff, but you get through it, it's not a big deal. So yeah, I was here on an F1 visa, I then took the OPT to do that first year over here, but then I used that to my advantage. Like they actually wanted someone that they could send to Europe, and they didn't necessarily have someone in the US that they could do that with. So being a foreign person was actually a benefit to them because they literally wanted to send someone, and I could be that person. So in some ways you can find an angle like that. I'm not saying everyone's going to find that, but don't think that you're hindered. Like you can try and spin things to an advantage. I hope that answers the question.
So we have Brian Bauman joining us on YouTube, and he's studying game design. His questions for you are, how long was the job hunting process post Full Sail graduation, and what advice would you give to make the process smoother?
Yeah, I'm not the best one to ask about that because I ended up making it super easy for myself, right? I think the key is just to be prepared for it. Like graduation's coming up, you can, don't leave it till the day you're walking across that stage to have a plan. So what I did, like I said, I was going to graduate in June. GDC was in probably the March. F in the chat for GDC, by the way. But the GDC was that March. So I was reaching out ahead of that show to find people to speak to so that I could have those conversations, which I would hope would lead to a job later on. It obviously just happened a lot faster for me than I expected it to. So I was a little bit worried, like, I'm having an interview now, but I want to go graduate. Are you going to be okay with that? But again, I think that was another benefit of going to a big company is, yeah, we understand. People have things they need to do before they can come in straight away. So, yeah, I made it easy on myself. And again, I worked hard at Full Sail, so I could prove myself. When I had the interview, I didn't lie on my resume. I told them what I could do. And when they asked me questions, I could do them. If anything, it's harder for me to interview now because a lot of that knowledge isn't fresh in my head. Whereas coming straight out of school, like, yeah, I just did that like a month ago. I did networking or AI or whatever a couple months ago. So it's harder for me to go interview for new companies now than it was as a graduate, honestly, because they're not expecting you to be super senior. You're being hired probably for a graduate or junior position. That's totally fine. So expectations are there. So yeah.
I was just wondering, what kind of difficulties did you run into when you first started working at EA post-graduation?
I think it's hard to remember when I very first started there, but I can talk about starting a new thing in general is like imposter syndrome is real. Like I definitely had it coming to Full Sail, to Facebook a couple of years ago, and it took a while to get over it. Of like, everyone here is super smart and they know everything, and I don't know anything. Why am I here? Right? And you feel really small, and then you've got this other urge of like, I need to know everything and I need to do something right now, and like they prove that they hired the right person and do something. But that's not necessarily the right way to go about it, particularly in the role that I'm in now. Like I'm not an engineer anymore, I'm a TPM, like I said. So part of my job now is to step back and observe and see how things work, and then say, I think that's a problem, and try and resolve that. So yeah, understanding that imposter syndrome is a real thing. They wouldn't have hired you if you were not good enough. So don't worry too much about that. You will get over it. And a good bit of advice I was given by one of my bosses was, a lot of people assume that you know like this much and everyone else knows this much. But actually, everyone knows maybe they know a bit more than you, but they know this, but someone else knows this, and someone else knows this. And what you'll know is the bit in the middle, and you overlap with everybody like a Venn diagram, right? No one knows this whole thing. That's just not how it works. So you find yourself the spot where you can overlap with people and connect them, and that's when you can have value. Cool.
So how long did it take to go from the software engineering side to the more managerial, higher scope area? So it was a year. I was definitely a software engineer. Okay, so I was working on those SDKs and things, and that's the point where they wanted to move me over to the UK. And at that point, it was going to be harder for me to contribute back to like the central team as tech, basically, because I was going to be like a one-man show on their own. So at that point, I was still an engineer, but they reclassed me as a field engineer, which is a new role. But basically, a tech guy that's out there in the field that can go help solve problems. But I ended up not really doing much coding at that point. I might have done some of like sample code and stuff like that. Oh, we've got this SDK, you want to do this feature, here's like a demo of how you might do that. So I'll do some of that. But that like went down and down over time once I built enough stuff to show things off. And it became more of like that consultancy role. So I wasn't necessarily managing people, but I was like managing a lot of projects and a lot of teams and how they were getting their stuff done. So yeah, that was, a year to 2 years is when that kind of transition was happening. So that was fun. And then when I decided I wanted to come back to the US, I'd been in the UK for about 3 or 4 years at that point. And they said, great, but you can't just like drop everything. You need to like backfill yourself. So I ended up having to hire a small team. I ended up hiring a team of 3 people, including someone that in theory was my superior, to run that team so that I could then come back. So for a brief time at least, I was a manager of a few people to help ramp them up. So that was fun. That was, 3 or 4 years.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Hey, Ash.
Hey.
My name is Tariq. I play a lot of fighting games, and one of the reasons I wanted to become a game designer / developer is because I wanted to put games out there that I didn't see in the market today. Mm-hmm. Now that you're in the industry, what kind of changes do you want to see?
So, like I said before, I tried to be the change, right? I was decided that when I was at EA that I wanted to make AR and VR a thing. And so I was trying to think how the company reacts to that as this wave of new technology comes. Because we'd seen things change from PC and console was a thing, and then mobile kind of exploded, and honestly, the company wasn't quite there with that, and they kind of missed that boat a little bit. So I was trying to get ahead of the next one. I thought VR was going to be that next big thing, and it could still be. So I was trying to make that a thing at EA, and like I said, they didn't see the market there yet, which is understandable. They're a big company. They're going to focus their money on getting a return, and that's where the audience is, and it wasn't in VR yet. So fine, like I said, how do I make that a thing? So that's why I decided to go work on a company that was dedicated to building those platforms, and that's what Oculus was doing. So I want to see broader adoption of those platforms. Obviously, I have insight into what's coming next, so I can see that there's some exciting things coming down the road all the time. So I want to see more adoption of those things. Eventually, like everyone's prophesized, eventually we're all going to have these smart glasses on all the time, and we're going to be able to see like this another layer over the world. So I can't wait to see some of that and how the world reacts to that. And it's going to be difficult. There's going to be a bunch of challenges along with that. That's part of the reason why I'm in privacy now, is that's going to have an impact on how those future technologies work. Is how these, yeah, that's the short answer. Cool.
Hello, my name is Jacob, and I'm in the game dev degree. My question is, you talked about the hard skills you learned, like how to do AR, VR, and Amazon Web Services, but what are some of the soft skills you learned on the side that helped you in your career?
I guess people ask a lot about networking, and I hate doing it, honestly. It's not my thing. I'm sure a lot of people in the room are the same. But, I realize it's important to do it, and also recognize that everyone else is just a person too. Like, they're not some big, scary being that I can't go speak to. And there's chances are a bunch of people in that same room as me, feeling the same as me. So it's just taking that first step of like, hi, and then that's it. Like, the conversation can start from that point. So that's one thing. And if it's draining, like I've done it for a couple of hours, okay, I'm done now. That's fine. I can go walk away now. I can, go play a game or do whatever I need to do to like chill out again. But yeah, networking was a thing for me. I picked up a bunch of other skills on the job as well, like working with different teams. Each one had a different personality. Some were like more friendly and like, oh, it's like a family, and some were more like hard, like, oh, we're going to get this done and we're going to be super technical and whatever. And so each one had different personalities, so you had to adapt the way you worked with them to kind of help fit their style. It's not one size fits all. I can't like make one way of doing project management and apply it everywhere. It's just not going to work. So being flexible to the way other people work is important for me. And then not getting too emotional about stuff. Like if there's a problem, don't like finger point. That's useless. Like, it's your fault. That doesn't help anybody. Like, how are you able to, even if it was something that you did, like maybe you deleted something from the repo or whatever, like that, we can't get it back. Even if that's something that you did do, you probably didn't do that on purpose, right? It wasn't probably malicious. So how was it even possible for you to do that? Let's fix that problem, and then it won't ever happen again, right? Problem solved. Meanwhile, okay, we have to go remake that thing you deleted, but that's so be it. It's a learning process. So being able to separate like the people and the emotions from the problem and the solution was important. And someone gave me some advice around visualizing it of when you're having a discussion like that, like if you can have like a piece of paper or something that with the problem on it, like put it on the table and talk about that, like point at that, not the person, like you did this, like the problem is this, and you can talk to this object basically. So there's a couple of different things there.
And then we'll get the one up in the front next.
Hey, I'm Pranjal. So for networking, how do you approach any company when you're a fresher?
How do you approach any company when you're a freshman?
Any big company.
Okay.
You're a freshman.
I mean, I told you how I ended up doing it. It was a long time ago, but I was networking. I was doing my research about who to go speak to and what I would speak to them about, and then I would reach out to them with that, rather than just like. There's no point finding someone on LinkedIn on the mobile app that works at some company and just sending like invite, because they're going to get random requests from random person with no context. So if you're going to do that, which is maybe okay, at a minimum, do it from like the website, because at least you can add a message to it and say, this is why I'm reaching out to you, and this is what I think I can do for you, or you can do for me, or whatever you're trying to do. You're probably more likely to get a response that way. So there's that, and then, yeah, if you can just try and meet people in different places. So I ended up making friends with someone that worked at Facebook, and we started, hanging out. And he was trying to convince me how great the company was. I wasn't really considering it before that, but okay, you make it sound good. So I was then he was helping me out in referring me into the company and stuff like that. And again, it took a while. That wasn't a magic bullet. It didn't help, but it kind of put it in my mind to try that path. And so now I was just applying like anybody else, just through the website, just applying for jobs. But again, tailoring your resume, getting the message right, understanding why you're applying for this, so that because you're going to get the questions. At some point, someone's going to reach out to you, a recruiter, and then eventually phone screens and interviews, and they're going to ask you a bunch of questions, and you can probably think about what those questions will be. So you should probably have some kind of idea of what you would answer. So why do you want to come to Facebook? If I don't really have a good answer, we just want money. That's not going to work, right? Because I wanted to make VR a thing, because I wanted to make games. I had my answer. I had my reasons for this. So yeah.
Hey, my name's Ayman Kamal. I'm in Simviz. I want to know your process when it came to switching towards emerging technology, especially AR. Since there isn't, since we haven't cracked the code to it and really understand everything there is to it, what was your process when it came to researching or really just moving into a new role? Did you have the integrity going into it since you already knew programming, or what was that process?
So for the AR stuff in particular, it was pretty good because I was going to a company that didn't necessarily have the experience in real-time 3D rendering, for instance, on a mobile device. And guess what? I came from a games company where there's a lot of real-time 3D rendering, and I just came from the mobile department where there's mobiles. So everything kind of fit from an experience point of view. I'd already been playing with Unity and other things, which was very similar to the tool that they ended up releasing. So by trying different things, I had built up that experience that made me able to have the conversations with these people. And when you're at a company like Facebook, where it's a new tech company, they don't have the answers either. They're inventing it as we're going along, right? So they can't expect me to know it all, because that means someone else has already invented it. So it's just being able to show the knowledge that you have and the value that you can bring to them and the skill sets they need, because the people there don't necessarily have it from the kind of things that they've already been working on, working on a website and then mobile apps that don't have this kind of functionality in. But more generally, actually, I end up doing it a lot, defining ambiguous areas. So an important lesson to me is being comfortable, being uncomfortable, and seeing where there's a problem and just figuring it out, because no one else has the answer either. So being willing to go do that. So I've been spending a lot of time the past few months defining what the problems are actually. Right? It's not similar to the answer I was given before about it's not necessarily that something got deleted. It's how is that possible, right? So it's digging into the actual problem and unpacking that, and then defining. Now that we know what we think the actual problems are, what could the solutions be? And forget how hard they are. What should they be? And great, this is the real thing we should do. It's going to take us, some amount of time. Maybe we need to do something in the short term that gives us some protection or whatever it is we're trying to achieve. So just doing that, digging in deeper than just the surface of what someone thinks the problem is, because often they're not there yet. You've got to ask why a few times. So that's how I end up doing it. And you've got to write it down. A lot of people, I work with a lot of smart people, and they have a lot of stuff in their head, and they just want to do coding, but that's great, but then you can't get anyone else to help you without being able to communicate that well. So I spend a lot of time crafting messages of, now that we figured out what the problem is, how do we make that simple for anyone to understand so they can buy in? Because you might get some leadership team saying, we're not going to invest any people in that because, these other things are important. So I have to have the right message to show them that, yeah, but if you don't do this, this is going to be other problems. So that's fine. You might make that decision. But here's the downside of that. Here's option A, B, and C. And one of those is doing nothing, and what the problems can be with that. So having that narrative and being able to spin that is an important skill I've had to build up.
We have another question from a YouTube viewer. Brian asks, could you talk about a development story from working on Madden at EA Tiburon?
Sure. So I didn't work at Tiburon ever, really. I was always in California and the UK, but I would travel out to visit studios quite a lot. I'd fly out to Sweden quite a lot to see DICE and whatever. So I did go to Tiburon a couple of times, which is why I was in the ball pit. what I was working on at that point was as a launch manager, like I said before, where it was like aligning all the different teams within the company to help release this game. And it was, I think it was Madden 25, so it was the first one for the Xbox One, I think. So, yeah, it was. There's no like horror story there or anything like that I can share with you, but it was just a cool process of putting all these representatives in from like legal, marketing, and game team, QA, and website, and all these other folks, and helping meet different parts of the company that way to help them come up with a plan. Like we were literally. I'd spend a lot of time with each one individually saying, okay, what do you do as part of your process? Like, you're marketing a game, what do you do? Well, I need to know what the game's about, and then at this point, E3 comes up, another F in the chat. So I'm going to need some assets at that point, and hopefully we'd have a demo reel and whatever they would need, right? And then the game comes out, and we're going to do this event. Cool, so you define what you want to happen, and you've given me some ideas of lead times that you need to be able to do your work, great. And I'm going to go do that with another department. I mean, put that all together, and then we bring it back and say, cool, so when is the game team going to be able to hit alpha and all these other milestones? And then we could overlay it on we would literally put masking tape all over the walls into swim lanes and post-it notes everywhere. And say, well, you want something here, but it's not going to get done over here. What are we going to do about that? Like, do we need to cancel that demo, or do we need to like throw more resources and something? Like, what are we going to do about it? So that's the way that kind of process works. And then having a plan doesn't mean anything's set in stone. Like I've said this in other talks this week, that nothing is permanent, including plans. So having a plan, though, it lets you know what the impact is to a change. If you've got no idea when things are going to get done and you just kind of let it happen and hope it gets done by the end, it's not going to work. But if you know that these things are meant to be in this order, and once you've finally arranged it so it looks like it makes sense, some milestone gets missed. Okay, so now what does that mean? How much time extra do we need? Did we have enough buffer in there to solve the problem? So yeah, that's what I was helping with on Madden, and helping out more on the tech side, like being more of a consultant there of, here's the kind of changes you need to make to your process in order to ship this game, because you've been doing it every year, but there's new things now with this new console that you need to consider. So that's some of the stuff I was doing for Madden.
Hi, my name's Ryan. I'm in the game development program. I was just wondering, what was the transition between going to school and going and getting a job, and like how smooth was your transition between those two, and what advice can you give to make that transition smoother for us people who are going to be graduating?
It wasn't too bad for me, honestly, because like I said, I got the job lined up before I graduated, so I knew where I was going to go, which makes it way easier. I obviously was going to move to another city, so I knew I could like cancel my rent here. I didn't have to keep renting this apartment here. I knew I had to go back to England first so that I could renew my visa, that kind of thing. So there was some uncertainty around timing of like how long are these things going to take, and some of the paperwork, but that was fine. And then I'm someone that can make a decision pretty quick. So when it came time to move out, it's like, same thing when I moved to Full Sail as well. It's like, come out here for a weekend and find an apartment, sign a lease, get in there, like go buy a car, like just get it done, basically. And so that's what I did. I'm very fortunate that my parents helped me out to get me started off. Like they helped fly me out, helped give me a deposit for the apartment and things like that. So I was super fortunate with things like that. I'm not sure what I'd done otherwise. But yeah, for me, prepping ahead of time so I knew what was next. So that's just the key to it.
Hi, I'm Gadavari. I'm from game design. I was wondering when in your career or during Full Sail, did you realize, like, I don't want to do just games, or I want to do a little bit of everything and not just focus on making games?
I was making games for a long time and I was really enjoying it. Like, I loved my time at EA, so I was happy to keep doing that. But I think it was towards, like I said, during Full Sail, I realized that it's not just about making the game. There's also like support around that to make that happen. So I realized that during Full Sail. So that's what I did for a lot of my career at EA. Then while I was there, I had been there a long time, and I was asked to go help on this mobile thing, which was fine. Let me go do that. It's a new challenge to learn something new. And as long as I was learning new things and expanding, I was happy enough with that. But I knew it was a risk going from like these huge equivalent to big blockbuster movies to equivalent of what I felt like was a soap opera. Like it just didn't match up. So after a while, like, okay, I've got what I want out of this. I don't know, I'm not getting any more. So I want to go do something else. So that's why I started to try and make VR a thing. And it wasn't going to happen at EA at that time. Maybe it will now. So I made a change. Like I said, nothing's permanent. If you don't like the way things are, go change it. That's on you. So I did. I started applying elsewhere. And it took a bit longer than I hoped it would. But that's okay. It worked out in the end. So now I was doing AR and VR there. That's fine. That was the next thing I wanted to do. And then making the decision to jump over to privacy instead, which is like a very different thing, and that takes me pretty far away from games now. It was just seeing that this is going to be one of the biggest impact things I can do at this time of my life, right? Like I said, almost 3 billion people at this point are going to be impacted by this. Like, where else am I going to find an opportunity like that? It's without facing a challenge like that, and it's terrifying, but without facing it, I'm never going to grow and show that I could have done that. I'm always going to wonder and not done it. I could play it safe, carry on doing the things I was doing, but I guess it's just not the way I'm going to operate. And I'm not going to stay doing privacy forever. I want to do something else after this. Like I said, maybe I'll make robots dance. Maybe I'll save the climate, whatever. I'm going to do something else after this too.
How's it going? My name's Brendan. I'm in the game design course as well, and my question had to do with your time as a launch manager.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, I wanted to ask about how, when you're releasing a game and you're going through the playtesting phase, how would you gauge playtesters and their feedback, and what is useful, what's not useful, and if it's something that is worth changing in the game, and if it's worth your time doing that?
Yeah, I didn't have to deal with that specific element as much, I guess, but like observing the game teams doing it, there's like every game ships with bugs. It's just like how bad are those bugs, and so you just assign levels to everything, and as let's just say you call them like A to E, like you scale them A, B, C, D, E, and A is like that's pretty bad. Like we better deal with that, and E maybe not so much. And like nice to have. So you just rank things like that, and over time, you just like, okay, we'll try and do all of them, and then over time, like, forget the E's, they're just going to have to ship, and then forget the D's, right? And it just whittles down until you get to the end. And then you're only fixing, like, game breaking, like, you're going to delete everyone's save file if this doesn't get fixed, that kind of thing, bugs. But then things changed over my career, right? Like, so then patches became a thing for console games, for better or worse, right? That became a thing, so you can do that. And now games are much more live service, so you're constantly adding new content anyway. So there's always that team that stays around to make more content, which wasn't necessarily the same deal back when I started. Like teams would move on to the next project, so that became harder. So yeah, the game team will triage things based on their own capacity and the urgency of the problems they could deal with. I was worried about other stuff, like we would do load testing of our game servers, for instance, and do we have enough capacity to host all the players we're going to have, and how many, that comes down to, well, how many copies do we think we're going to sell in the first couple of weeks, and like how many players are going to play at the same time. And so there was a whole bunch of math involved in trying to predict that, and I ended up actually being pretty good at it. So we could start keeping these things more stable, because we've all seen game launches that have fallen over because of that demand. But that was part of the point of this team, is to help improve things like that, to have the whole company prepared for stuff like that. Sure.
Hi, I'm Joseph. I'm in the game dev program. So you had mentioned studying like other disciplines, like if you're game programming, looking at art stuff or something related. Would you recommend that we work on that now, or is that more so something to focus on once we get into our career, or is there not just, should you just do it whenever you feel like doing it?
I mean, yeah, maybe you're not a personality type that would want to do it, right? Maybe you literally are a numbers guy, you just want to program, and that's all, you just want to do art, you just want to do one thing. And that's fine, like you can just do that, but I think it's beneficial to look at other things. And so like whenever you've got the time to go do it, I think at Full Sail it's pretty intense, like you don't get a ton of time to do a bunch of side stuff, but you can spin things in some of your classes. I'm assuming your curriculum is like similar to what mine was, right? So you still have to make tools at some point. So while you're doing that, like if you're making like a 3D model exporter or something, then use that as an opportunity to try making some 3D models to then export and see how that works, right? You can, I like to do, like I said before, multiply my time. So doing several things at once. So like, again, I was using Unity with a VR SDK on mobile. Like there were several things in there that I could learn several things at once. So same thing, if you can find a project that you can like add a twist onto it to learn something else at the same time, even better. That's how I would try and go about it. But if you don't have time at Full Sail, fine. Like you'll go get your first job and then do things on the side from that point of view, or like just talk to other people in your team or around. Like if you're making a final project, you need 3D assets, and go speak to some 3D animation students and like see if you can get something out of them and like talk to them. And the same thing for the audio folks. So yeah, that's how I'd go about it.
My name is Chris. I'm in the SimViz program. You talked about how you were working at EA and you wanted to do the VR AR, and you brought it to them and it didn't go anywhere. How could you tell that that was going to be the case and that it was time for you to move on to somewhere else with your transition to Facebook, with stop beating your head against the wall here and find a door elsewhere to get to that?
Because I was putting time into this on the side, right, and I was thinking these are some of the ideas I think people need to think about, and I'd get some interest from some people that because I knew the right people to talk to. I thought about this stuff because I was trying to build these central things. So I was showing them, and like, oh, this is what I think. Some of the things we need to think about, if not now, in the next few months or a year or whatever. And I'd get some, yeah, you're right. We probably should do some of that, but we're not really looking to staff that right now. Like we can't really come join our team, so it kind of left me where I was. I keep doing the mobile stuff, which there's a point where I was like, I just don't want to do the mobile stuff anymore. I don't want to wait for this potential opportunity, where if I have to keep doing the thing I'm doing, I just need to do something else. So that's the point where I started, applying for other things. And again, it took a bit longer than I wanted to, but eventually it all worked out. And if they'd have turned around during that time and said, oh, you know what, we're ready now, we're going to go do it, then I could have stopped looking. That's fine. But that was my backup plan, right? If it's not going to work out here, then at least I've got another way out eventually, hopefully.
Hey, so since you're at Facebook now, what are the incredible things that you see from your team, especially when it comes to the qualities, like from your leaders to, like when it comes to dealing with emerging technologies and things that are going to change the world? Like, what are the things that you see in the people around you that really help you guys move forward?
There's a bunch of stuff I could say about that, I think, but I guess a couple points. One is that like they hire very smart people, all very capable, and that's great. Like you want some of the best people around you, so you can get things done. You can trust everyone to get their stuff done. It's a very different culture. Like EA at the time, it changed over the years, but with different leadership. But it was still relatively top-down of a company, even though it's a creative company. So like these are the products we're going to make. We're going to try and shoot for this time of year, that kind of thing. So your plans are more or less given to you to then just kind of work towards. Whereas Facebook's very bottoms up. So there's direction set. Like Mark Zuckerberg has an idea of like what he thinks the company's all about and the mission and what we're trying to achieve. And underneath that, there's like Instagram, WhatsApp, Messenger, like all these other different teams, AR, VR, with their own version of that mission, how they're going to contribute to that mission. But then it kind of stops, and then it's down to everyone else to come up with, so how are we going to do that, guys? Like, come up with the ideas and do them. So it's a very, like I said, bottoms-up culture. But because everyone's super smart, we all can chip in with our ideas. They've got a very, they've got this hacker culture. So if every few months they have a hackathon, so you get like 2 or 3 days, you can cancel all your meetings, ignore all your emails and everything, and you can just go into a room with a group of people, and you can just like make whatever you want. So some like the biggest products of the company have come out of that. Facebook Live, for instance, is something that was come up with at a hackathon. And so what happens is you make these things, then you present them to a big group, and then there's some winners are elected, and you get to show them off to Mark, and he might there and then say, yes, like make a team, like just go do that, make that a thing. That's probably fairly rare, but like I think Live was an example of one of those things. So just having that culture of like, what else can we try, and having that mentality of don't just iterate, like how
don't think about like making it a little bit better. Make it 10x better, which might mean burning it to the ground and starting again, whatever it is. Try and like shoot for that next thing. It's much better to set that high goal and not quite reach it than setting like an easier goal and like nailing that doesn't get you as far. So those are kind of some of the mentality that people have there. Thanks.